Okay, I'm going to go ahead and begin. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you can hear me all right. To all of the people here, the distinguished professors, honored guests, we welcome you. My name is Zari Panosian. I am the co-chair of this conference, along with my colleague and classmate, Jennifer Hammerschmidt. We're both law students here at the ASU College of Law, and we welcome you to 100 years later, the ASU Armenian Genocide Conference. 2015 marks the centennial of the genocide of an estimated 1.5 million Armenians, hundreds of thousands of Greeks and Assyrians at the hands of the Ottoman government. This weekend, we have invited over 20 scholars, attorneys, writers, and journalists to share various perspectives on the genocide. These discussions will include Jewish and Native American perspectives. We welcome you to this event and hope that what is discussed at this conference resonates and also kindles future conversations about the impact of the Armenian genocide. Now, if you will please welcome Arizona State University Vice President and Secretary, Dr. Christine Wilkinson, to say a few words.
Thank you and welcome. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to Arizona State University, for those of you who are from the community and also visiting, and to know that this is an extremely important conference celebrating the 100th anniversary. And what makes it extra special to me is the fact that your committee who planned this was a group of students who will be our future leaders, to help relay the messages that are learned today, and as well as lead in their profession. And I would like to have them stand again, the two co-chairs, Zari, who's right here, Jennifer Hammerschmidt, Jennifer right over here, another second-year law student, Nicole Fries, Nicole. And a senior in W.P. Carey, Tro Panosian. Tro. You know, I can't imagine with all the studies and everything else that's going on, and most students had a spring break, that these students were really devoted to spending months in preparing for this particular conference, and one that is important for all of us to be aware of. I also remembered seeing the Malikians, where are you? Who have always been so supportive, there we are back here, who've always been so supportive of everything we're doing through their center and all of the things that they have done to contribute to the university. So today is a celebration and an honor for the memory of the millions who did lose their lives, and also to celebrate those who survived and who could send the messages and tell the stories. Because for some very, very unfortunate reason, things like this should not ever happen again, but they continue to do so. Sometimes it's decades later, sometimes it's generations later, but it does occur in different parts of the world. And for all of which the media now encompasses, you would hope that these things can be stopped at a very early point, and that people can stand up to a group think and to question as individuals what's really right. And that's often extremely hard. And Tro knows, because we've shared some conversations in the past, that even for my family during World War II, were put in camps that you know, on one day you're fine, and the next day you're something that no one is supposed to touch, talk to, or hear, and put in a, actually just put in all kinds of transportation and moved to different states. And in other generations, if you think about what's happened to the Jewish people in World War II, it's just amazing to me that these things can continue, and we know it's continuing even today. So this is a teachable moment. There are extraordinary scholars and faculty who are going to be here over the next day to talk about the different perspectives. I'm so impressed through reading their biographies and knowing some of them myself, working with them, how dedicated they have been, not only to this topic, but to understand the concern and the issue as a whole. So thank you so much for coming. We're glad that you're here, that ASU is helping to sponsor this, and that you're actually in the College of Law, the area where you hope these individuals, as they become professionals, are the ones who will advocate for, who will support, who will defend those who have been wronged. So thank you very much, and let's hope for more ethical people and people who are kind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilkinson, for those incredibly wise words. We would also like to thank and recognize Associate Dean Alonzo Jones. If you might stand. We would like to thank you for all of your support throughout this planning process. Now I'd like to invite to the podium representing various statesmen from both the Republican and Democratic parties of Arizona. If you could help me in welcoming Chairman of the Arizona Republican Party, Robert Graham, and Christy O'Brien, the Vice Chair of the Arizona Democratic Party. Mr. Graham, Mr. O'Brien, will you please come up?
All right, so thankful to be here and the privilege to be here. As my role as the chairman of the Republican Party, we have some relations that you may be familiar with, and I wanted to read a couple messages from some of our electeds this last cycle. The first one is from our Attorney General Mark Brnovich, and this is a quote from him that he wanted to share today. It says, "I would like to extend my gratitude and admiration to the organizers of the ASU Armenian Genocide Conference. In order to learn from history, we must take an honest look at things that have happened, whether they are comfortable or not. I stand together with victims of persecution wherever it occurs, and I urge all governments to adopt policies of transparency, open dialogue to help stop further crimes against humanity." Next is from Secretary of State Michelle Reagan. "On the year of the centennial, I stand in solidarity with the Armenian American community in Arizona to remember the over 1.5 million victims of the Armenian genocide." She reminds us of the chapter that reflects back that started in 1915. She says that during my tenure in the state legislature and now as Secretary of State, I've had the pleasure to spend time with the Armenian American community. Visiting you at your community center last year, I remember how welcome you made me feel and how you treated me as a member of your own family. I am proud to call some of you my friends, and I look forward to your continued friendship and wish you all the very best. It's great. It's a great opportunity to come and present and to talk. They all apologize. They're everywhere, all over the state, doing their jobs and trying the best they can to touch the communities. What's amazing to me is when you look back on history and you see these atrocities and you start to wonder, how can people in any way give up the humanity, the sensitivity of heart, the consciousness when you look into somebody's face and see pain and suffering and realize that they're people. And there's something that happens with people where they divide themselves away from the humanity, right? They separate themselves. They start to engage in rhetoric and propaganda, and they start to forget. And what I've found is that when people engage humanity in the sense of serving each other and loving each other, trying to bring cultures together and being culturally aware, it strengthens the overall community. It leads to great innovation and creativity and a betterment for people, and it brings people along as it relates to humanity. When you think of genocide in this sense, in its pure sense, and you think about the hatred and the ill will and even the power establishment that's trying to gain ground or do whatever it's going to do. The people are the only people that can fight back. When you stand back like this, history is something that's remarkable if we look back and we recognize it. I know there's a call for the Turkish government to call it for what it is. When people engage in the truth, even if they weren't a part of this terrible behavior, they start to recognize that people can move on and they can start to mend fences and they can start to find strength and courage to take that next step and to fight for another cause. So when we engage in this whole process, we need to be awakened to a remembrance of our duty as humans. We can talk about human rights all day long, but it's the humanity that we have to remember and that we have to engage, right? It's the love of the people. If you look at the history, you look at the photographs, you look into people's eyes that were affected intimately at that time, and some of those people are still here with us that had relatives that passed on and that were killed in the genocide. So again, make it human, make it real, recognize it for what it is, but engage history in a meaningful way so that we can stop any progress. It's not just one country or one place that typically has it. Even today in this world, it's happening in a lot of places today. And so again, being aware, engaging in the process, and trying to really be, fight in the right way, we have great outcomes. It's my privilege to be here. I'm happy that I was able to bring messages from our executive leadership in the state. And just so you know, people are aware. And now we can rally together and we can start to get momentum to do great things. And so let's do it together. And thank you very much for allowing us and the Republican Party to be here with you. Thank you very much.
Hello, good evening. My name is Christy O'Brien, and today I'm here in my capacity as Vice Chairwoman of the Arizona Democratic Party. And while this conference is nonpartisan, I want to thank the organizers for allowing us the opportunity to show bipartisan support for recognizing the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide. Today, each of us arrive here with our own story of our journey of why we're here to commemorate the genocide. For some of us, it began 100 years ago with the murder of relatives or the survival of relatives. For some of us, we're just beginning our journey and we're here to learn, and we'll carry this forward when we leave the conference. My journey began almost 20 years ago, not to date myself, and it was a project with the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. As an undergraduate student, me and some fellow classmates were tasked with the job of deciding which pictures were too gruesome to be seen by the youngest visitors. So when you go, you'll see there's about a 3-foot-tall partition. And when we looked at those pictures, my world opened up to just the darkness of which humanity is capable of. And I thought, how does someone decide to perpetrate such horrendous acts against fellow humans? And my journey continued through international studies, and I went on to law school, and I went on to intern at the Coalition for the International Criminal Court in the Hague Secretariat in the Netherlands. I monitored war trials, crimes against humanity, the Charles Taylor trial that was going on in the Special Court of Sierra Leone that was sitting at the ICC. And I wrote legal summaries, and those summaries were sent out to over 2,500 non-governmental organizations in over 150 countries. The value of spreading the word of what happened and what was going on, to give those victims their day in court, sometimes decades later. We know that genocide was not invented with World War II. We know since then, we have seen Cambodia, Kosovo, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Sudan, Libya, and dare we say Syria. But before all of these events, there was Armenia. So Adolf Hitler once posed the question, who will remember the annihilation of the Armenians? Today, we stand collectively in defiance and say we do. So this weekend, Representative Sinema, lovely ASU alum, could not join us, but she sent her words, and I'd like to read this letter. 100 years later, ASU Armenian Genocide Conference. On April 24th, 1915, hundreds of Armenian intellectuals, business leaders, and artists were killed by the new Turkish regime, and a genocide that would eventually slaughter or exile most of the Armenians from Turkey was set in motion. After the Holocaust, the world said never again. Unfortunately, genocide exists in parts of the world today, and it is why this conference is so important. Thank you to the ASU Law Students Armenian Genocide Centennial Committee for organizing this weekend's events and for shining light onto the atrocities that occurred a century ago and today. Genocide is an issue that is important to me personally and as a member of Congress, and I regret I am unable to join you today. But I am with you in spirit, and I commend the work and the outreach that you are doing this weekend and send my heartfelt appreciation for your proactive approach to an issue that affects us all. Sincerely, Kirsten Sinema, Member of Congress. I can tell you that all of the delegation that I spoke to over the course of the past week strongly sends their support and regards and the importance of this event. So as we reflect on the intellectuals that were rounded up and killed that April day and the million that followed, those doctors, those lawyers, those judges, those law students, may we see parts of ourselves. So I came here this weekend with the Democratic leadership behind me to learn, to listen, to remember, and to carry this forward where I go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both to Mr. Graham and Ms. O'Brien, and of course also to Arizona Attorney General Brnovich, Secretary of State Reagan, and Representative Kristen Sinema, who is of course an ASU alum. It is now my pleasure to introduce who many of us have been waiting for, our keynote speaker, Professor Tanit Akçam. Professor Akçam, born in Turkey, was interested in Turkish politics and history from a very early age. As the editor-in-chief of a student political journal, he was arrested in 1976 and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. Amnesty International adopted him as a prisoner of conscience, and a year later, he escaped to Germany, where he received political asylum. In 1988, he began his work as research scientist in sociology at the Hamburg Institute for Social Research, where he researched the history of political violence and torture in the late Ottoman Empire and the early Republic of Turkey. Professor Akçam received his doctorate in 1995 from the University of Hanover with a dissertation in the Turkish national movement and the Armenian genocide against the background of the military tribunals in Istanbul between 1919 and 1922. Between 2000 and 2002, Professor Akçam was a visiting professor of history at the University of Michigan, and he also worked as a visiting associate professor at the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at the University of Minnesota. He's been a member of the history department at Clark University since 2008, where he serves as a Kalusian and Magar Chair in Armenian Genocide Studies. Without further ado, please help me in welcoming Professor Tanit Akçam.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I thank you first, the organizers, Zari and Jennifer at most, and for inviting me here. It's a really great pleasure for me to be here and to be able to share my thoughts with you. I decided to talk today on some aspects of Armenian genocide which hasn't been discussed enough. I thought you have already a very general idea what happened in 1915, but there are some other aspects which hasn't been addressed yet. I thought using this stage I would like to talk on that. And what I want to talk to you is talk on certain particularities of Armenian genocide, some aspects which really I thought very important to know. One is the issue of religious conversion. The other issue is the assimilation of children, putting them into orphanages or distributing them among Muslim families, or the other important aspect, forcible marriage or concubinage of girls with Muslim men, and also a limited settlement policy. These aspects which hasn't been addressed actually enough in the field, and this is one of my research that I've been working over the year, and I thought I should talk on this, and in question and answer period we can go over more on the issue. So, why these all aspects that I listed hasn't been debated or discussed in Armenian genocide? I have two basic reasons for you. Even though these were really an important part of the genocidal process, they were systematically neglected. First one is a normal result of accepting a legal definition as the basis of analysis in social science. It has something to do with the term genocide itself. And the second one is the character of the sources used in Armenian genocide research until maybe recently. So on the first point, this is maybe an introduction for those students who are interested in genocide studies. Lemkin, who coined the term genocide, he actually understood genocide not only as a single act, but alternatively, he thought genocide as a series of connected acts, a process that unfolds over time. And in his book, when he first introduced the term in the Axis Rule in Occupied Europe, this was the book, chapter 9, where he introduced the term genocide, and he wrote that the concept of genocide does not necessarily mean the immediate destruction of a nation. Lemkin was talking on a process, actually. So then, according to him, genocide has two phases. One is the physical destruction, and the other is the forced assimilation, which I formulate. Maybe it's not enough to define with forced assimilation term, but this is what he said. Genocide has two phases. One, destruction of the national pattern of the oppressed group. This is the physical annihilation. And the other, the imposition of the national pattern of the oppressor to those who could survive the genocidal process. So we have here two different aspects of genocidal process here. And here I have a list of negative consequences why really it happened that we understand the genocide the way we understand it today. Basically because genocide was introduced 1948 as a criminal law, not as a social science category. It was a law. And because it was a criminal law, international criminal law, we all, based on this term 1948 genocide definition, we considered genocide as a single event and mostly as physical annihilation. And then we examined from the perspective of whether or not it conformed to the 1948 convention. Whenever we looked at a case, then we said that whether it fits the definition or not. So those social scientists who did not agree with United Nations definition, whether justified or not, they began proposing their own definitions, and which is what I call it definitionalism or classification or labeling. So what all scholars did mostly, they took their cases and then 1948 definition and tried to bring their case as close as to 1948 definition so that they could prove that, establish that their case is also genocide. And another negative consequence of the process was the Holocaust, the role of Holocaust that it played in that debate. Holocaust turned into a sine qua non in our area. Similarity to Holocaust became the yardstick against which an event might or might not measure up as a genocide. Scholars spend an enormous amount of energy to prove that their case is similar to Holocaust, and then of course some certain aspect that was not similar with genocide, with the Holocaust, they neglected. This is what we call in our field methodological suicide. Why I call it methodological suicide? Maybe you know the Greek mythology, Procrustean bat. This is the famous bandit blocked the roads, and he had a bat. Whoever he cut, put on the bat, and if the person was longer than his bat, he cut the foot and hands, and if it's shorter, he stretch the individual to the bat. This according to the mythology, the important thing was the bat, and this was what we did in social science also. We took our cases, and if it's longer than Holocaust, we cut. If it is shorter than Holocaust, then we stretch so that it should fit the definition. This is, and in Armenian genocide case, it was also not different. Over the years, debates on the Armenian genocide within genocide studies have also suffered from these general weakness of the emerging field, and especially given the Turkish Republic's preferred stance of denial regarding the mass annihilation, the question of whether or not 1948 definition of genocide could appropriately be applied to the event of 1915 became the lodestone of all debates. Oh, sorry, you can. Yeah, of course. So, then the fear that the events of 1915 would not be considered genocide if they did not resemble the Holocaust obstructed a serious analysis along the line of a dynamic process, and then meanwhile a concerted effort made to ignore all the differences naturally that would arise between two discrete events of mass violence. So the forced assimilation in form of collecting the Armenian children, distributing among Muslim families, forcibly marriage or forcibly conversion to Islam, they were completely omitted in genocide research. And this is one important factor. And the second important reason, the character of the sources that we used in Armenian genocide research. Even though at the beginning, in the early stage of Armenian genocide research, we had a lot of information in consular reports or in missionary report, basically the American missionaries who were in Ottoman Empire beginning 1820s even, we read aloud aspect of assimilation, namely religious conversion and so on, but they were not so truly systematic studies actually. And this is something to do with the sources, as I said. Until recently, the main topic were either sources were either German documents or Austrian documents or the American consular reports or survivor accounts. Their information, if you read these materials, leaves the impression of there being a chaos afoot in the true sense of the word instead of a systematic policy in this area. One reason of the creation of this kind of confusion was the lack of knowledge of what the different decisions were like taken in the Ottoman administration during this process. And the consuls and missionaries were, like many others, without knowledge of these decisions, and their reports did not consist of precise records with respect to chronology, which could have made the administrative changes evident. Instead, they were mostly in form of observations covering a long period of time and some generalization. Based on this, it can be supposed that religious conversion or policy towards Armenian children was a practice which changed from region to region and was primarily left to the discretion of the local administrators. It was also believed in Armenian genocide research and among the Armenians also that the motive behind the religious conversion would be the Muslim fanaticism. There were some fanatic Muslims in certain area, they forcibly pushed Armenians to convert. And also similarly, among Armenians there was a belief even the religious conversion would not sufficient to save the lives of the Armenians, and consequently it is taught that those converted Armenians were also annihilated at the end of the process. It's not correct. So I will give you an interesting material. What is this interesting material. This is, let me give you, before going into some examples, I'll give you on the materials, why we have to change our views and way of thinking on Armenian genocide. I basically used Interior Ministry papers, Ottoman Interior Ministry papers, and these papers belonged to various branches of the Interior Ministry's General Directorate, and what is called Emniyet-i Umumiye Müdüriyeti. And the second important office was the Interior Ministry's Cipher Office. I have to give a couple of information which is important for you to understand this Interior Ministry's Cipher Office. What is it? It was established towards end of 1913 within Interior Ministry. Imagine you were in 1915 in the Ottoman Empire. To travel from Istanbul to any provinces in the eastern part of Anatolia would take normally 2 weeks, if not 1 month. So the communication was almost impossible. They established this special office in Interior Ministry, and the job of this office was to send short telegrams order to the provinces. And these telegrams look like that. These are standard telegrams. You can see them, have them in the Ottoman archive today. And as you see, if I can show you, the list are the name of the provinces and towns, and if one telegram should not be sent to a certain places, they just cross it over. So this means this telegram should be sent to all other remaining provinces. And these were also short orders, and basically sometimes they say the real extensive report are following. But this short order was directly to the individuals, and this is, for example, another message that also sent by the Interior Ministry, and this defined the rules how these telegrams should be read by the local officials. This is what this telegram says. This is the telegram that I'm showing you. In this telegram, they explain to the local governors that there will be 3 different categories: urgent, confidential, or to be handled personally. And they have also certain categories. When they say urgent, sometimes they make highly urgent or extraordinary urgent, or highly or extraordinary confidential, or to be handled personally by a governor. And these telegrams were coded, cipher telegram, in this form. And on the other side, the receiver end, they received the telegrams in that way. And they had the, of course, key, and they deciphered these telegrams. This is the important part. This is a telegram, came from Anatolia to Istanbul, and as you see here, I hope you can see that it is the numbers, you can hardly see that, and then officer in Istanbul deciphered them and write what these ciphers mean. So what we are talking about here, some documents which are not produced for public consumption. High confidential documents between government and local governors to organize entire process. These are the kind of documents that I'm talking about. And let me give you another interesting example to you so that you can understand why we scholars most of the time say that the Ottoman authorities destroyed some materials, or the archives doesn't have the entire materials. Here is a document to show you. This is one way to find out that some documents are missing. On top of it, you see some Arabic numbers. I am so sorry that I don't have the, here, of course. So, these are the numbers, 1, 2, and so on. These are the city names that these telegrams were sent. And as you see, these are the 1, 2, 1 and 2, the numbers to these cities. And the telegrams date 1st March 1331st. This is the beginning of the year, first day in Ottoman calendar. This is the 1st January, let me put in modern way, 1st January 1915. So they started numbering the telegrams to any cities with these numbers, number 1. And how we know that? Here, another telegram to you from the March 32. This is the next year, 1 year later, and again, as you see, 1, 2, 2. So this means they sent so many telegrams on the first day. If you look these archival materials, let's assume one city here, Erzurum, and 1st March, it says number 1, this is the first telegram, and July 1st, it says 85. This means in the Ottoman archive, you have to have 85 telegrams sent to city of Erzurum. How many telegrams you can find there? Maybe 20, 25. 60 is not there. So you can do this in all cities and provinces. So this is one of the reasons. There are so many other reasons that we know that archives were cleansed, but this is one important sign how they clean the archives. We don't have, for example, a lot of telegrams sent to the regions. So when I talk about assimilation, I'm not improvising, I'm not doing a word. This is the term that they use in their documents. And the term temsil, this is the singular in Arabic, and the temessül, plural, in Ottoman documents, which mean assimilation, were openly used in these documents. Bakım ve terbiye, this is another term, care and upbringing, it was used for children. So they want to take care and upbring the children. So the important thing is here that we will discuss more what is the relationship between assimilation and physical annihilation. I will talk on that topic later. So this is important question for us, or important information. Assimilation, forced assimilation, was an important government policy, and it was directly given as an order from central government to the region. So how was the religious conversion? So number 1 point, I'll show you some interesting document on that. Ottoman documents show, this is the first documents that I could find, that Ottoman authorities allowed Armenians to convert into Muslim religion, especially in Black Sea region, and in some other region, they allowed Armenians to convert. And second important, surprising information for you, those early Armenians who converted in the early month, they survived the genocide. They were not sent and annihilated. They survived. And if you wonder why now in Turkey, so many new people coming out and saying that their grandparents were Armenian, one of the important reasons is that. So this is then important information. They allowed the religious conversion at the beginning, and they, for example, this is a report from a Black Sea region, and the governor, after deporting the entire Armenian from its own region, he reports, he says, the final caravan of Armenians being expelled from Samsun, this is the Black Sea region, from 4 days ago. In this way, the expulsion process concluded, so they emptied the region, and those remaining for the purpose of carrying out the procedures in the view of their demonstration of conversion on the condition of immediately being transferred to town and villages were distributed 1 or 2 each Muslim village neighborhoods. So the Armenians in that area were distributed, those who converted to Muslim, distributed within the same provinces. And the reason why they distributed, it has something to do with the population policy. I will talk about it also. But it continued until 1st July 1915. The number of Armenians who convert into Muslim religion was more than they expected, and they stopped conversion. And this is one circular order, July 1st, 1915, and it says, send every Armenians if even they converted to Muslim religion. So they didn't allow, and then the religious conversion abandoned. If Armenians wish to convert, they would be subject to deportation. Reason to burn, it turned out that most Armenians were willing to convert in order to escape death. And after this general ban, orders with the same content were separately sent, almost daily basis, because local authorities, either through bribery or through other means, they want to keep some Armenians in their areas, and one order after another saying, no, send them away, even they convert Islam. So it appears then in many areas conversion to Islam continued, and local officials, maybe by bribery, encouraging this, but overall after July 1st they were sent all the way and exterminated, because very simple, the number of Armenians was so high, it is in the documents also clear, they would never forget their being Armenians. This was the logic behind these issues. And it shows us that actually religion, the belief in the Islam was not so important for the Ottoman authorities. Here an example from another city. This is Urfa. Those Armenians knows this city. It is very close to Aleppo today, and it was south of the historic Armenia. And the people in Urfa, Armenians, were seeing the convoys coming from north, and those Urfa Armenians listened to stories of exterminations, killings, what happened to them on the ways. And as a result of these, Urfa Armenians sent a telegram to central government and saying that we are ready to convert, and we want to convert our church to mosque, and we will be also Muslims, please save us. And this is an order from central government. It says it is not appropriate to approve the church be converted to a mosque, nor for the conversion to Islam. So the Armenians in Urfa, they were also deported and exterminated. So this shows that they had really some other logic behind their policy than believing in Islam. And this extermination policy of Armenians continued until November, actually. And November 4th, there was another circular to all provinces saying that we lifted conversion again. So it was allowed to convert into Muslim religion, and there were some conditions attached. And I'm not going to do into conditions in details, but the points below concerning the conversion of Armenian must be taken into consideration. Number one, the conversion to Islam of those who remained in the neighborhoods where they resided from old and were not deported is accepted. So they opened the gate. Why? Because they thought extermination, the number of exterminated Armenians was high enough, and they could again allow conversion and became Armenian can remain in their states. Another important aspect that we really neglected in Armenian genocide is the limited settlement policy and assimilation during the settlement. As you know from the general knowledge, the Armenian genocide, the deportation started 1915 May, early May, and continued actually until 1915, end of August. And those Armenians were deported to Syria, north of Syria and Iraq, and they were settled there. And there was a policy of settlement. You have heard now on the news also the city names Rasul Ain, Raqqa, Darzor, Aleppo. These were the places where Ottoman authorities really took these as a place of settlement. And in early months of genocide, there was a settlement policy, and during that period, they followed also an assimilation policy. And in that policy, this is one of the telegram, the important part was that Armenians should not use their languages. There was no forced conversion. In the early months, Armenians could have their religious duties. Even the priests were allowed to travel from one province to one city to another. And, but the most important thing is Armenians should be, for example, they are coming from Marash, and all Armenians coming from Marash to Aleppo, they should be distributed in small groups and really settled in different places. So the people from same province should not be settled in the same places. This was the general rule. And then the new settlement areas, they should be at least 5-hour distance, walking distance from one another, according to document. Then so that the Armenians should not develop a self-defense mechanism there. And important also, another issue, Armenians were not giving permission opening the Armenian schools. And Armenians were not allowed to use their languages. So this is a classic assimilation policy, but not religious involved. And this is a military communique. It makes the points very clear. It says, for those Armenians who arrived in Syria and North Iraq today, the language of domestic and foreign communication and correspondence is to be Turkish. Absolutely no permission shall be given for the establishment of Armenian schools in the areas in which the Armenians are to be resettled, and all Armenian youth are to be educated in government schools. So, at present, permission is given to publish Armenian language newspapers only in Istanbul. This is what they did. Armenian newspapers were allowed to publish in Istanbul throughout the genocidal process. So this is the official communique for the establishment policy. But with the beginning of November, there is another change in the policy. This is the reason why the consuls, missionaries, they got all confused with all these back and forth policies. But there was a logic behind it. With November, they changed their policies. Let me go back at the end. I have a map. I can show you what I mean. These are the camps that they put the Armenians, settled Armenians, when the Armenian came to Syrian desert. And these are basically Aleppo, and then around this river, they established a lot of settlement areas, and 1914 November, they decided emptying beginning of Aleppo towards the Derzor area. So the camps started being emptied November onward towards the Derzor area. And it is what we call it second phase of Armenian genocide. And throughout this period, the major decisions were taken in Aleppo. And number one, they arrested all Armenian priests and clergies. And they also didn't allow any Armenian religious ceremonies. And this is the time that they started to allow them to convert into Muslim religion. And with the emptying of the camps, it goes all the way towards Derzor, and with the 1916 March, they started a second wave of killings and massacres. Around 300,000 Armenians, beginning of 1916 March, all the way end of 1916 were exterminated throughout these area. And this is another important development. So they, at the beginning, they allowed the Armenians but to settle in that area, and then with the November, they changed the policy. Why? There is I cannot go into detail, but just for information, there was a very cold-blooded social engineering behind it. Their overall policy was, you can read the extensive, all of that in my book, the overall policy was Armenians in Syria and Iraq desert should not exceed 10% of the Muslim population in the area. Those Armenians who arrived in the area, their numbers was so high than they expected. They couldn't exterminate all them all the way. And then they organized this second wave of genocide. And this is then in order to be able to do that, what they did, they monitored the numbers. One more information, within the Interior Ministry, there was an Office of Immigration and Settlement. This office was in charge of all this population movement. And guess what? Which department was in charge of the deportation? Office of Statistics. I'm not exaggerating anything. Office of Statistics was in charge of entire deportation movement, and they were monitoring the numbers. And the term monitoring is not my term. This is the term that they use in these Ottoman documents. They say they should be constantly monitored, the Armenian numbers. And the receiving of all the Armenians sent there from various locals and their resettlement in the provincial center and peripheries is not acceptable, because since it will subsequently result in them forming a relative majority in that area. And therefore they should be constantly monitored. So when they send Armenians somewhere, their logic was they should not exceed actually 10% of the population in that areas. And this is then they were asking regularly, I'm not exaggerating, sometimes daily basis telegrams about the numbers. This is another secret document. For example, it sent end of August, it says how many of Armenians to be deported, how many still remain within the province to be deported, how many Armenians are currently there who are scheduled to be deported to the designation location, and where are these persons now, how many Armenians currently being deported, are there on the roads, at the railroad station, or in the villages. And then it continues. How many Catholics and Protestant Armenians are there within your province, provincial district, because Germany is pressuring the Ottoman government, and Ottoman government was really trying to appease Germans, and the Catholic and Protestant Armenian numbers are very important in that sense. And then they were asking what are the respective percentage of Armenians, Protestants, and Catholics relative to Muslim population. So they were monitoring the numbers continuously, and these kind of telegrams you could find in the Ottoman archives, dozens of them. They were asking local Armenians, let's assume a city, Aleppo. How many local Armenians are there in the city of Aleppo? How many foreign Armenians? This means Armenians came to Aleppo from other areas. And those who were not deported because they were Catholic or Protestants, in certain cities they didn't deport Catholic and Protestants. And those who were exempted because they were family of soldiers, in some areas they allowed soldiers' families to stay. And then those who converted to Islam, they want to know the numbers, and therefore not deported, and those who were not deported due to some special order, doctors or other important people they need for the military, they were also not deported. But they kept record for all these. They were monitoring the number very carefully. So here is a number game for you. The entire population in the areas where Armenians should be settled was around 1.8 million, the Syria and including Mosul. Mosul is an interesting area. At the beginning, Mosul was a settlement area, and then it was taken out. Mosul was not a settlement area. But I included Mosul also as a settlement area. The Muslim population in the entire area is approximately around 1.8 to 2 million. And in the number of Ottoman governments, they published a black book a couple of years ago, you know, and the number of Armenians officially, the deported Armenians, are around 1.3 million. So how can you make 1.3 million Armenians 10% of 1.8 million of Muslim population. And I have another calculation, another question for you. Do you know how many Armenians survived the genocide in Syria, Iraq areas? It's approximately 150,000. This is my argument. I'm saying that Union and Progress Party were more effective than the Nazis based on planning and implementation of the plans. Holocaust scholar, we learned from Holocaust scholar, the Nazis could implement maybe only 20–30% of what they actually planned. And here we have another picture. CUP, the Committee of Union and Progress that organized the Armenian genocide, they were more effective than the really Nazis in implementing their overall goals. So then I move to another important aspect. This is the assimilation of children. As you know, there are several arguments to explain Armenian genocide. One argument is the Turkish government policy say that it was only a reaction to the war. During the war, there were war contingencies, Russian army was advancing, and we had to deport the Armenians from Warsaw. Or some other critical scholar also say there were no planning and there was no premeditated plan in Armenian genocide. Of course, if you look at the documents tells us a different picture. The Ottoman document itself. Here are some documents. This is from June 26, sent to important provinces in historic Armenia. Trabzon, Sivas, Harper, these are not important. Most of you don't know this name. But important here is, telegram sent June 26. And this is important information for you to know. The deportation from all these major cities that this telegram was sent started July 1st. And another important information for you, this is a telegram sent by Education Ministry. And Education Ministry uses Interior Ministry's cipher office and sent a circular. This means there must be a cabinet meeting. And after a decision of this cabinet meeting, they must have decided to send a circular and using Interior Ministry's cipher office. And before sending Armenians from that provinces, it says, since consideration has been given to the idea of education and upbringing of the children under the age of 10 of those Armenians who have been relocated or in some fashion deported, either through the establishment of an orphanage or the gathering of them into an already existing orphanage, report back with all haste how many such orphaned children there are within your province, and whether or not there is a suitable building in existence for the establishment of orphanage. So there was an already pre-planned attempt to collect the Armenian children and to put them orphanages, and in some cases, if there is not enough orphanages, to distribute them among the Muslim population. Here another document. This is then during the July, the deportation already started from these big provinces, and it says, for the purpose of the care and upbringing of children who are likely to be left without a guardian. So they knew that there will be a physical extermination on the way, and the kids will be without parents, and this is the telegram, secret coded telegram. This is not for public consumption, and it was sent also ciphered. It's only for the consumption of the high official in the provinces. And then they say that who's likely that there will be orphans during the course of Armenian transportation and deportation. And what the order is, the children's distribution to the notables and the men of repute in villages and counties where Armenians and foreigners are not found, and they pay each family who takes an Armenian kid. They pay an Armenian, any Muslim family, 30 kurush. I don't know how many dollars it makes now, convert to our price, but monthly from the special appropriation for immigrants, for the children who will be left over after the distribution and will be given to those who do not have the means of substances are seen suitable. So there is a planned policy towards Armenian children, to collect them, distribute them among Muslim families, forcibly make them marry with Muslim men if they are girls, and this is really, and set up orphanages and educate them according to Muslim tradition. Very much similar to Native Americans' boarding schools experience after 1850s, I'm sorry. And there was another important method that they used. This is a telegram sent from the central government to all local officials, and says that even the Armenians, those are Muslim families who took an Armenian child, they had the right of heir. The children's properties would go over to this Muslim family. So it says the personal property, this is the order, the personal property of the children who are to be left with people worthy of trust for the purpose of education and upbringing, together with that of those converting or marrying, will be preserved, and if their testators have died, their hereditary shares will be given. Now we understand some missionary reports from Harpert. Why missionary were reporting, saying that the Turkish families in Harpert, in one city, fighting with each other to get the child of a wealthy Armenian family, because they would get the entire property of that family also. So I don't want to say anything against those Muslims who really saved Armenian lives with altruistic purposes. But we have to also know that there was a financial incentive behind this also. And it was a very systematic policy of the Ottoman government. So, this is a telegram sent by the Cemal Talat, the interior minister, to Cemal Pasha, 1916, and it is related about the situation of the Catholicosate in Sis, south of Turkey. And then he explains, for the purpose of the expelling the Armenians from the Cilicia, and the purpose and the direction behind it, the activity, why we have to empty this place, he says, it was to completely rid the existence of this place, which is considered of such high historical and national value for the Armenians in Cilicia, and which was purportedly the last center of the Sultanate of Armenian state. What Talat is talking about is actually completely removal of the presence of Armenians' existence in certain cities in overall Anatolia. After all, Armenians were really emptied from this region. What Talat didn't know at that time, we call it today genocide. Thank you very much for listening.
Here. Thank you, Professor Akçam, for that wonderful presentation. In a few moments, we're going to begin our question and answer period, which will be moderated by Professor Peter Balakyan of Colgate University. We would appreciate if you could please pay attention to the parameters of this discussion, and if you might get Nicole to pass out the note cards. And in just a moment, we will be having volunteers pass around note cards with writing utensils. We ask that you please write your name on your question. We're doing a written Q&A so we can facilitate the number of people and the number of questions that I'm sure everybody has. If you could please write your name on the question, we would greatly appreciate that, as anonymous questions will not be answered. And if you would like to include any affiliation with a student group or other organization, for example, we'd appreciate if you might mention that as well so that we can recognize that. In the interest of entertaining as many questions as possible, we will only respond to one question from each audience member. So please write the question that you would most like for Professor Akçam to answer. And due to the audience size, we're unable to entertain every single question that is presented to us, but we will try to select a diverse range of questions to engage as many viewpoints as we are able. For those of you who would like to continue to speak about certain issues or ask other questions, you are all cordially invited to the networking event that is following this lecture. That event will be held at Culinary Dropout in Tempe following the conclusion of this evening's discussion. We ask that everyone in the audience remain civil and polite to facilitate our discussion, and if you disrupt the question and answer session, we will ask you to leave. Thank you, and please welcome me in please join me in welcoming Professor Balakyan, our moderator for this evening's question and answer period. So we'll give a few minutes for everyone to write down a question. Once you have, if you want to pass it down to the center, we can give Professor Akçam a minute to rest and relax, and then we will continue with about a 20-minute Q&A. Thank you so much.
Well, using the time, I show you another map. Oops. So this is an official Ottoman map prepared by Interior Minister himself. So these yellow areas was considered the settlement areas for Armenians, so that you know there was a wholesale planning in that operation. So. No.
But maybe he's just coming out of back.
Yeah, he'll come. No, he might not use the bathroom. So you have to take Peter's job. Why not? Hmm? He's back. So.
Wonderful. And while we are waiting for everyone's questions to get written down and collected, I wanted to go over the program for the remaining conference weekend. Tomorrow's program will begin at 1 o'clock, and we're very excited to invite various ASU professors from the history department, from the law school, from various areas on campus, The 1 o'clock program will start with 2 panels that will be going on at the same time, the first of which will be on comparative history of genocide. We have Professor Barlo Dermagadician, who's here from Fresno, speaking on the Armenian genocide. We're very lucky to have Professor James writing in, speaking about the Native American experience of genocide. Professor Anna Chichopek from the ASU History Department, speaking about the Holocaust, and that will be moderated by Professor Jason Bruner. The panel that will be going on at the same time will be on the framework of genocide, the legal framework of genocide, and we're very fortunate to have ASU law professors Bodansky, Rothenberg, and Clinton speaking to those issues, as well as very special guest U of A professor Najma Napti, who will be speaking on the sexual violence of women during the Armenian genocide, and also special guest from Los Angeles, very well-known attorney Mark Giragos will be here tomorrow to speak to issues of restitution and the Armenian genocide. The 3 o'clock panels will begin by having 2 panels on cultural revival, which will include perspectives of Dr. Ani Kalajian, who will be speaking on the trauma of genocide and other generations, and writers from around the country, and ASU MFA alum Naira Kuzmich, as well as writers from the Armenian commemorative creative collective 99 and Counting. And we will also be having a panel on the remediation and reconciliatory aspects of genocide, which will also begin at 3 o'clock tomorrow. And tonight, as I mentioned briefly before, we are having a networking event at Culinary Dropout in Tempe, which we invite everyone to attend and be a part of to continue this discussion of genocide. I hope that Professor Akçam's lecture so far resonated with everyone, especially in light of the issues that are being faced today by Syrians in the Middle East and by other minorities around the world. I believe we'll be starting with the Q&A session shortly. If anyone has any questions about the evening events following this, we would greatly appreciate if you might come to any of us, and we would be happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
The number of questions here is impressive, a tribute to my friend and colleague Taner Akçam. And there's no way we can entertain all these questions, obviously. Actually, I'm going to keep reading some while this is going forward, but there are a bunch of overlaps. So, Taner, I'm going to start with a few questions here that deal with your scholarly journey. Okay, so a group of questions, I will summarize them as they overlap. How were you able to get to these secret documents? How were you able to read the codes? Where are the archives located? How accessible are they to scholars? And how safe are they from future destruction? So that's a group. There are a bunch that are about that, Taner. Yes? Okay, I'm sorry. Did everybody hear me? All right. The first round of questions for Professor Akçam have to do with the documents. How is he able to get to them? How is he able to read the codes? where are they located, how accessible are they to scholars, how safe are they from future destruction. So, Tanner, you can take that for starters.
Thank you very much. These are documents from Istanbul Archive. This is what is called Prime Ministerial Archive, and it is one of the really wonderful archives in the world, actually. And it is a walk-in archive. You can go any day and without any prior registration and start working. And another important information is the system of cataloging of the Ottoman archive. It's a little bit different than the American or German or British archives. If you go to, worked in British Archive, for example, and ask the foreign ministry's materials, and you will get an FO number, and then you will get a file with 1,000 pages. You have to go through these 1,000 pages. So this is categorized basically on dates. From this date to that date, reports from council of whatever city, and you have to go through these documents. In Ottoman archive, the system is totally different. They categorize the individual documents. So you already read in the catalogs the summary in Turkish language, and you can choose these and you can order these documents. The only problem is you can get, it changes, but you can get every day around 25, 30 documents. It changes, but when I was working there, it was 20 documents. I know from my students, they changed the number. So the number of documents that you can get one day is limited. And compared to thousands of documents, of course, it is a limited number. And how we can get these documents, you don't need to decipher these documents. These are the telegrams in Istanbul before sending to the provinces. There is the officer who turned these in numbers in the cipher form, as I mentioned, and you can read these. The other documents that I showed you, the telegram from the province that came with number, and we cannot read them if they are only coded. We don't know what the code at that time was, what the key was. We only can read them in this form, and this is how we read. This is another important issue you should know. These are not smoking guns. These are not killing orders. Maybe an important information to you. Talat, the interior minister, he was a telegram officer. It was his profession. He knew how to use the telegram machine. And we know from several sources, at least from his wife, that he had a private telegram in his house, and he was using regularly and coordinating the entire process from his house also. His wife gave an interview 1983 to a journalist, and this journalist published this interview in 2010 as a book. And in that book, Lady the Talat's wife said that to this journalist that every day officers from Interior Ministry was coming and they were coordinating the entire activity from his home. And we assume the killing orders, the smoking guns, they were sent basically from his house. But the Interior Ministry documents, these are documents on assimilation or on deportation or on numbers. These are not smoking guns. And our estimate is we don't have the entire cipher documents, for example. As I gave you the example, we think that maybe we have 30–40% of the entire materials, maybe less, we don't know. Because we know 1918 October, when the war ended, certain officials from Interior Ministry went to the archive and cleaned entire really materials which were really dangerous for them. And there was a court case in Istanbul, 1919, against some officers and the minister for burning the official documents. But despite all these distractions, they cannot destroy the entire archive, because This document shows us one thing. Genocide is not an event or a decision of a person suddenly at one day. This is really, you need an entire machinery, entire apparatus of the state. You know, these documents, sometimes you find the same documents in the archive in 7 different departments. Interior Ministry had, Justice Ministry had, Justice Departments, certain other, because they made the copies of the same document and sent to different departments also. So this shows us the complication of a process. And these documents are available to everybody. Everybody can go and get these documents. The working condition has really changed, and it is really one of the good archives in the world. But I have to add, there is another archive. It is the military archive in Ankara. It is closed. It is not open to scholars. Generals allow only those individuals who are close to them, and they can go and work, but it's not allowed for scholars to go and work in that archive. So this is it, Peter.
Thank you, Taner. Okay, another group of questions which coalesce, or I mean, there are half a dozen of these that are intersecting. Taner, here they basically the multi-layeredness of this is the following. Can you comment on Turkey's systematic alteration of historical facts in their current educational textbooks? What percentage of the Turkish politicians and people accept the Armenian genocide concept? What is written in Turkish history books regarding the genocide of the Armenians? How well informed are the Turkish people and the general population about this history? Let me add this as another door of this question. What is the official Turkish response to the overwhelming documentary evidence that you have? Well, it just says to the overwhelming documentary evidence. Is it ignored or is it interpreted differently? But you get the drift. Okay, this is really a set of different questions. Let me say a couple of words on the education and how the question was handled in Turkey. Actually, when I went to school in Turkey, we learned nothing. I went through the Turkish school books and in Turkish curriculum until 2000, to my guess, there was almost nothing on Armenians or Armenian genocide. In early years, there was only one sentence, and it went like that. 1915, Armenian collaborates with Russian, and as a reason of this collaboration, they were deported to Syria. Only 2 sentences, nothing else. And the overall Turkish policy in education regarding the education changed in 2000, basically. Until 2000, Turkish government basically followed a defensive strategy. They were just reacting whatever happened in diaspora. And 2000, you remember, was an important period. There was a resolution in American Congress. Clinton was president, and it was also the same time that the French Parliament passed a law to criminalizing the denial of Armenian genocide. During that period, Turkish government made a decision, and they moved from a defensive policy to an aggressive policy. Proactive. They decided we have to be proactive. And they established a special institution within the National Security Council. They call it to fight the alleged Armenian genocide claims or something like that. And several cabinet members were the members of this committee. And they also started to teach, they changed the curriculum. And this time the purpose was to teach Turkish children, including the Armenian children in Istanbul also, how Armenian committed a genocide against the Turk. And this is the curriculum. And they organized the
mandatory teachers program, and teachers were also taught accordingly. And through the 2000, there were certain commissions, I don't want to go into detail, on the way of European Union, and there was a commission between different governments, Denmark or Holland. They established a commission with the purpose of really to go through the Turkish textbook and to clean the Turkish textbook of the hatred and animosity and racist speeches and so on, but it was not successful. Just last year, I published a long article, and I just copied the sentences from Turkish textbook, what they have written or what is included in Turkish textbook on Armenian genocide. And basically, the Turkish textbooks today, history textbook, on the 9th and 10th grade, where they basically teach this history, it is full of hatred, full of animosity against Armenians. This is very sad, but the true reality. So the government's official declaration on the one side saying that we are ready to talk with Armenians and so on and so forth, but on the other side, Turkish textbooks gives us totally different picture, and this is the reason that I'm calling my government, before saying anything else, first really withdraw these textbooks from the circulation and change this hatred language against the Armenians. That, I mean, I don't want to go into detail. You can find this article that I wrote in Armenian Weekly, and I quoted from Turkish textbook. For example, Armenian burned their own houses, that Armenian killed themselves, then to blame the Turks. Unbelievable accusations and hatred against Armenians, full. And how many of Turkish people accept Armenian genocide today? Nobody knows, and there are not important, I mean, there are not enough research there, but I would say it changes from region to region. If you go to Kurdish areas today, you will see the openness. The Kurdish people acknowledges what happened to Armenians, openly call it also as genocide. Newly, there was a public poll published 1.5 years ago in Turkey that approximately 18% of Turkish people believes that what happened to Armenian was either genocide or was really a crime. It's around 18%, but we should not take this so seriously. We don't know, because polls are always manipulative. You can really arrange the question and answer accordingly. But I can tell you one, this is important, after Hrant Dink's assassination, 2007, the psychological attitude in Turkey changed totally. Until 2007, we were underdogs. We were attacked. We were dragged from courtroom to courtroom. There were hate campaigns against us. In Turkish mainly newspapers, they attacked us, they harassed us. Even in the United States, when I was lecturing, I was physically attacked. There was a huge campaign against those individuals who were open-minded. But after Hrant's assassination, psychological overhand passed to those criticals like myself. Today, I would say there is a general acceptance in Turkish society that something bad happened. This is the general acceptance, and you can see in Turkish televisions every day public debates, discussions on 1915, and there are a lot of people, they use the term genocide very openly and talk and debates and discusses. And I think it is the government is more in defensive position at this moment. And we won the moral war, if I may formulate in that way. And what is the Turkish government reaction to my book? I don't think that it is so important for them to have a position against a scholar's book, but I can tell you as a general impression that I have, even among the government members, I had the experience, I'm not going to in detail, they respected my writings. I mean, they take it seriously. Let me tell you the story, why not? I was in Isfahan. I really recommend you to go to see this city. It is an unbelievable city. And it happened when we were walking through the palace, the Shah Ismail's palace. It's a beautiful place. I suddenly saw that the health minister, the Turkish health minister, is also there. And then I spoke to my Armenian guide next to me and said, "Oh, our minister is here." And then somebody heard what I say and then came to me, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Taner Akçam, I'm the historian from America." "Oh, let me introduce to our minister." Then he pushed me and he introduced me to the minister, and we shook hands and we chat how beautiful it is, and he recognized me, and it was a 30-second or 1-minute chat. And then after we left, there was a lot of problem there, noisy discussion and debate. And then the guide told me that the Iranian security forces made a lot of big deal how this individual, the guy, can push me in front of a minister because of the security issue. It was a dangerous thing. And then I saw this person who put me in front of the minister. I said, "I'm sorry, I caused a problem. You know that I didn't intend to meet the president." He said, "Don't worry, Mr. Akçam. You are such a respected scholar of our country, and it was my duty to introduce you to our minister." So this is one experience, and I think they respect the scholars like ourselves. They don't share our position. Maybe one information most of you don't know. Now the chief advisor of Prime Minister today is Etienne Mahçupyan. He is one of the best friends of Hrant Dink, and Etienne Mahçupyan is an Armenian, and he wrote several times open articles on Armenian genocide, and he wrote several op-eds on my books also. I'm not saying that everything changing in Turkey, just the opposite. It is still the denialist government, but to give you the impression, the political atmosphere in Turkey. Even, I mean, put yourself in the prime minister's shoe. Even he doesn't see a big problem to appoint an Armenian who openly calls 1915 as a genocide as his chief advisor. So this is the political climate in that country that changed, that I'm talking after Hrant's assassination.
Taner, a number of people have asked you what motivated you to begin to expose the history of these Ottoman atrocities and this whole scholarly project of yours. What motivated you?
It is an interesting question. I have been asked several times. And there are two simple answers. It is given to me. It was what I had to do. And the other is the coincidence. Why I had to do that. If you know the Turkish history, you know that it is full of suppression, full of torture, killings, animals in this country. I lived through, at least through my life, 4 military coups d'etats. 1960, 1970, 1980, 1997. 4 military coup d'etat after another. Only in 1980, there were more than 1 million people tortured in Turkey. More than 500 people killed during the torture in Turkey. And here is my family story also. My family also experienced this hardship of Turkish society. It was first my oldest brother, arrested 1969 during anti-Vietnam wars. He was against the war, and he was arrested, and he was in prison 15 days. And then 1971, after military coup d'etat, it was my father's turn. My father was a teacher, and he was the General Secretary of Teachers' Trades Union. And he was an activist, trade unionist, as a teacher. And he was arrested after military coup d'etat, 1971, and he was in prison approximately 6 months. Then after that, it was my turn. As a student leader and activist who were writing in Students' Journal on the existence of Kurds, it was banned to write at that time that there are Kurds living in Turkey. And I was arrested a couple of times, and finally I was arrested and stayed in prison 1 year until I escaped. I was sentenced to 10 years. After me, it was my brother's time. 1981, after the military coup d'etat, my brother was arrested. He sit 9 years in prison, and one day my mother got the news that he was tortured to death, and it turned out wrong. But my mother, along with other mothers during that time, walked on the streets of Ankara with the bloody undershirts of their children, and my mom became one of the founders of Turkish Human Rights Organization. So this is my life story. And Vahakan Dadrian, my mentor, says, if somebody experiences so many hardship, it is so normal for him to start working on that story. So this is it is given to me part. There was a coincidence also. I started working in Hamburg Institute for Social Research, and my first project was on the history of torture in the Ottoman Empire. And I encountered first time the Abdülhamit period massacres, 1894, 96. I had never heard about them. I said, oh, very interesting. I have to look into it more. And we had a librarian at our institute. She was a German, but then it turned out actually her mom was an Armenian, but she is assimilated in German society, and when she learned that I'm very critical on certain issues, she really pushed me to work on that topic, and saying that you have to do that as a Turk, you have to do that, it is so important. Normally, as a common Turkish intellectual, I had the perception, you know, Armenian genocide 100 years ago, who cares, move on, it's an old story. And we have so many other important issues. There are social injustices today, Turkey, there are Kurdish questions and other issues. Who cares with the story of 100 years? Something bad happened, people killed each other and so on. So this was my hesitance to that issue, and then through all these different coincidences also, so I started working on that topic. And it was then my government made me to continue working. Why? You know, we scholars, when we write our PhD, we usually move to the other topics. And we used to write other things. And then they started attacking me. They started really making this a problem. And I consider still today the biggest insult if somebody wants to tell me what I have to say. It angers me. It angers me, because this is my being a human. I differ from the animals only through one thing. I have reason and I have an argument to say. If you have anything else against my position, say it. Don't attack me. It makes me crazy. It drives me crazy. Really, I'm not exaggerating. And I'm not a courageous man. I'm also a human being. I'm scared to death certain period of time. But you cannot take one thing from me. This is my thinking and my freedom to really articulate what I think. In Washington, there is a memoir, you say that, you know that. Freedom is not free. So we have to fight for it. This is where I am.
It seems like that's a great place to end, but they're saying I should have one more. Okay, look, one more. As we're crescendoing in these kind of macro visions, which are beautiful, Tana, there's a question here that says, Leonardo da Vinci said, man is truly king of the beasts. My question is, do you honestly believe man will ever arise above himself, meaning...
I don't understand, I'm sorry?
I think the question is, can the human being rise above being a beast? That I'm assuming, maybe this is a question I really shouldn't have taken, it's a little bit fragmented, but you've touched on it. Can the human, okay, we study atrocities. And when we study atrocities, I'm riffing on whoever's question this is. When we study atrocities, we're confronted with the worst human beings do to each other. The question is implying, can humans go beyond bestial behavior. What's our best, let me try to reframe it. What is our best path to moving above and beyond mass violence? You've just actually riffed on a piece of it, but do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, there is a general rule. If you want to change anything, what is called bad, you can change in two ways. One, through education. You have to convince people to act in a good way. And the second, you have to have the prison to put these people in that prison. So both, you can never, I mean, these are two ways. You can never educate, you can never achieve through education, but this is the only thing that we have. This is what we have to do. We have to educate our children, we have to educate everybody not to use the violence and to be against the mass atrocities, but we know that it is not only an issue of behavior, it's not only an issue of good and to be a good or bad person. We know it is a problem of structures. Structures produces these also. I mean, so you have to be able to change the social structure, the political structure, and it's a long, long process. So the other way is really to punish the people to create this awareness. You know why most of the genocides occurs? Because of the impunity. Impunity is so important. In Ottoman case, this is the case that I know, why people voluntarily participated in killings, for example, during genocide. Because they knew there was no punishment. They did it in Abdülhamit period, 1894-96. They did it in 1904 in Sasun. They did it in 1909 in Adana. I mean, they repeated, and you see, then they plundered the Armenian wealth. They plundered, they took out the children, they kidnapped the Armenian girl, they raped them, and at the end, nothing happened. So this is what we call impunity. Impunity encourages the people to repeat the crimes. So we have two ways of fighting these kind of behaviors. Number one, we have to educate. Education, we have to never give up. And on the other side, we have to keep our prisons ready. So this is the two answers that I have.
Professor Akçam, we're all indebted to you. Thank you. Let's give Taner a great round of applause.
Thank you.